When she was just 17 years old, she accepted a ride from a stranger who turned out to be a homicidal maniac, threatened to torture, kill her. He was armed with a knife. She was held at knife point. She barely escaped with her life, only to find out a decade later that she was on a drive with a serial killer. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Calling us from Arizona, we have Constance Drew on the phone. By the way, Constance is someone I met quite a while ago on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, a free app. Be sure to check it out. Look for me, follow me. My name's John. Middle initial J. Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, or at L-E-T Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by Breakfast with Champions, holding rooms daily in the Clubhouse drop-in social audio chat app. Download the app today. It is free. And join us in Breakfast with Champions, where everyone gets to see the table. Be heard. Find new friends from all over the globe. That's the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse drop-in social audio app. Get more details. Download the app today for free and get more details at thebwcinfo.com. Constance, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate you having me on your show.
Well, you've got an interesting story. And truth be told, it took you a while to say, I got to find the strength to be able to tell this story.
Yes, it did. And just a little information on that, basically. I wrote a book in May in a 3-day virtual retreat, and I got stuck on this story. When I sat down to write, I thought I was writing a business book, and that's not what it turned out to be at all. It turned out to be more about my life journey. And I literally got writer's block on this story and could not write until I wrote about it. And it was something that I'd blocked out for a long time. So as you mentioned, it took me a while to really kind of work up the courage to go ahead and share the story for the first time.
And what's odd about that, Constance, is you were forced into a life and death situation where you had to summon the courage to fight back and escape. So later on in life, we have to summon the courage to be able to write about it and tell people about it. Well, it may seem ironic. I understand totally.
Well, I appreciate that because, yeah, it does take a lot to write about this. And I even made a trip to see my kids over the summer to talk to them a little bit about this because I said, I'm going to come out with this book. I waited till you kids got older because there are things about in the book that is related to them. And I just thought this was the best time. I told them I thought it was time to share the story. The story is one, John, that I did not even share with my parents. They went to their graves without knowing that I had this experience. And I think it is pertinent now, though, that I come out with it and let other people know that regardless of different situations you have in your life, that you can overcome them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen overnight. I'll be the first to admit that. But I think that, with work and time, and I think the biggest one for me, and like you mentioned with my hesitancy about coming out with the story, is I had to finally face it. And I really sat down and I relived the experience.
Well, that's not, that's very uncomfortable to do. There's certain parts about my story that I don't want to talk about. Not that I deny they occurred, not that I'm embarrassed or anything like that. I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to remember it. I don't want to relive any of the emotions with it. And I don't want to answer questions about it.
Well, and you nailed it. That's a lot about how I feel with it, too. And especially because, it's a personal experience. There's not anything documented per se about it. And I think it took me a while to really realize that it's okay. It is my story. It did really happen to me. And I don't need to document it. I don't need to prove it.
You were 17 years old when this occurred, correct?
Yes, I was. And basically what had happened was just kind of a prelude to everything. I had a rare blood disease when I was 16. And I was entering my senior year of high school. I basically didn't even go to school for that semester because I was crippled. I had to learn how to walk again. And this is pertinent to the story because literally I had already decided that summer that I wanted to move 450 miles away from home to go to college. And I had some friends and family there. And so that's what I did. I mean, I got better. I wasn't able to go to school. But I graduated early. So 3 weeks after I turned 17 in December, I moved 450 miles away from home by myself. And I started college there, and one of the reasons I did that was I wanted people to just get to know me because I still had like moon face and some other things, side effects from the prednisone and the different heavy medications that I was on for the blood disease. And so even prior to having this incident happen, I'd already had to go through a trauma of learning how to walk again, and kind of learning who I was again.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, 17 is not easy. People ask me, would you go back to being a teenager again? I'm like, heck no. I mean, I love being a guy in my 50s and 60s. It's so much easier.
And I totally agree. And especially being 17 in the 70s was not easy.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Oh, the kids today have no idea. We didn't have TikTok. We didn't have social media. We had to entertain ourselves. We hung out with friends. We drank beer in the woods, all that fun stuff. And then it's like, I really had a good time as a kid. I really had a great time, but it was an awkward time. It was a difficult time, and as always trying to be someone I wasn't. So when you say you're 17 and you had these health challenges and you decided, hey, look, I want to embark and set my own path. I get it.
I really am glad that I did because I learned a lot about myself. I was able to make a lot of good friends. And it just, like you said, being 17, too, I grew up in a small town. And I rodeoed, and I was in FFA and 4-H and this, and that, and the other. And so I was kind of a scrappy kid anyway, so I kind of could hold my own. I wasn't too worried about that. And I think that's what really caught me off guard, when I share my experience about what happened with the ride that I took, was that I wasn't scrappy that day. It would not have served me well.
One of the really funny things, and not funny, ha-ha funny, is we have this image in our mind of how I'm going to react in life and death situations. And, it's shaped by what we see in movies. And as a cop, I would love to tell you that I was like Clint Eastwood and go ahead, make my day, and other witty comebacks. The truth is, my responses were never like that at all. They were courageous. They were heroic for sure, but they were also muttering sounds that made no sense, acting like you had no control over what was going on, because you really don't. And it's a fight for your life quite often. It never turns out like Hollywood.
No, it doesn't, John. And that's one thing that I learned very quickly. Like I said, I am proud of myself in the sense that I was able to assess my situation.
One of the things, Constance, I know or I suspect that you were hesitant to talk about is because, sometimes we have this guilt where we beat ourselves up over, I should have handled it better. I should have, could have, would have. I should have done this. I want people to understand this. Constance was 17 years of age, a long ways from home, wound up in a car with someone who turned out to be a serial killer, threatening to torture her, threatening to kill her. It literally was a life and death situation. And yeah, I can see where it'd be easy to beat myself up and say I should have done something different.
What has surprised me is what I've really come to realize is that it's the victims that he did take, that I've had to work through the guilt.
And the survivor's guilt is a real thing. We're talking with Constance Drew. Constance is calling us from Arizona. She's going to talk about when she was 17 years old, wound up in a car ride with a person who wound up being a serial killer. She's also written a book that goes into great detail about it. It's coming out soon called A Drive with a Serial Killer. She is a podcaster, Wickedly Wise Women Entrepreneurs Podcast. She is a business coach, help people get their business off the ground and grow. Her website is startuptosuccess.com. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Looking to store sensitive samples or substances? A desiccator cabinet, sometimes called a nitrogen dry box, is the perfect solution. These cabinets maintain a low humidity environment to professionally preserve your valuable samples and substances. And where can you find the best desiccator cabinets? Try DesiccatorCabinetsDirect.com. They offer the lowest prices, quality products, and top-rated customer service for an unforgettable shopping experience. Visit them online at DesiccatorCabinetsDirect.com or search for them on Amazon.
First thing in the morning on my phone, I join the Breakfast with Champions morning show in the Clubhouse social audio app. Both are free. I can grab my coffee, no makeup, no hair to do, and connect with people live from all across the world to jumpstart my day. Join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse social audio app.
Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Return conversation with Constance Drew on the Law Enforcement Show. Constance is a very successful person. She has the Wickedly Wise Women Entrepreneurs podcast. Her website is startup2success.com. That's startup2success.com. She coaches people. She gets their business going and growing no matter where they are in a cycle. And she authored a book, A Drive with a Serial Killer, about when she was 17 and she wound up in the clutches of someone who turned out to be a serial killer. For when the rate, Constance, you're talking about the lead up to it, going to college, everything else. How did you wind up with this homicidal, maniacal killer?
Well, I'd gone home for the summer, and then I decided to go back up and visit my friends and family that I still had in that area. And so, imagine here I was, 17. I just graduated from high school in May, won't even go into all of that. But anyway, graduated in May. I'd already been to a semester of college, graduated officially in May, went up in June, and I was staying with friends. And I had gotten kind of like a respiratory infection. And one of my cousins, when I talked to her, she said, well, why don't you come by the clinic where I work at, schedule an appointment, and we'll get you something to help you with that. So I thought, okay, fine. And I called and I, scheduled my appointment thinking that when I went in a few days that my cousin would be there. And she had offered to give me a ride. And also the friends that I was staying with had said the same thing, we'll come and pick you up. And can't remember why I decided to take a Greyhound bus and drive myself. But anyway, I was up there without transportation. And so this sunny morning, if you can imagine, I get up, I get ready, feeling pretty good because I'd lost the weight from the prednisone and so forth. So I was feeling pretty good about myself. And my friends dropped me off at this clinic. And I actually get in and out much quicker than we thought. Well, it turns out that my cousin was not working that day. So I tried to get a hold of my friends. And mind you, this was in the 70s when we didn't have cell phones. Well, they weren't home, so I couldn't get a hold of them. And then when I did finally get a hold of one friend, she wasn't able to come pick me up. She had a flat tire, her mother told me. Long story short, I stepped outside to think, man, what am I going to do now? Well, there had been a really good-looking guy in the clinic with me, and I had noticed him. And he walked out and went past me and kind of went down the steps. I can still see this to this day. He had a really nice Camaro. I noticed sports cars, and of course I noticed because he was a good-looking guy. And he started to unlock his car, and he looked at me and goes, oh, do you need a ride? Well, unbeknownst to me, he had actually overheard inside that I didn't have a ride. And I went ahead and thought, well, it's not very far away, and surely, I'll be okay. So I get in the car with him, and I don't know, this would have been mid-morning or so. And anyway, so why don't we started talking, and just things seemed pretty normal. We were laughing and talking about his car, playing rock music that we both liked. And he said, well, why don't we swing by and get a or something? And of course, that was common for us to do in those days. And as we pulled into though, something started not feeling so right with him. And that's when he asked me if I wanted to smoke a joint. And I kind of laughed and I said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I thought, there's no way I'm going to smoke a joint with a stranger. So he got kind of funny about things. And I thought, man, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. And so I said, well, I'm not too far from here where I'm staying. And about that time, a police officer pulls up in a police car about 2 spaces over from us. That's when this guy got really weird. And I thought it was because of the drugs. And I kind of glanced at the police officer, and right when I did, I felt something in my side, and it was a knife.
Yeah, there's a definite reaction when you saw the cop.
like he definitely had, some kind of, and again, I thought that he was reacting because of drugs, and no, I think it was other reasons. So he had the knife to my side, and he told me, he said, "You look at me." He said, "You don't even look that way." And, he pushed the knife in my side enough for me to feel the tip of it, and it was a pretty long hunting knife. And so I looked at him, and that's when I just thought, oh my God, what do I do now? And he just said, "Let's just talk." And I remember saying very little because I was really trying to figure out how to get out of the situation. This is serious. Something's going on here.
Did you, at that point, realize that it was really life and death, or did that come later on?
That came later on. I mean, I knew that I was in trouble, but I hadn't really realized the extent of it. And
the follow-up is, for many of us, when life or death situations occur, we have a moment of shock where it's like, I can't believe this is happening to me.
That's exactly what happened. It's almost like I left my body. I'm like, this can't be happening. Like, what is going on here? And, I mean, I made sure that I looked at him, and, I kept conversation what little bit that we talked. And I'll never forget the feeling I felt, though, when the policeman pulled out of that parking lot, out of that Sonic Drive-In, because as I saw him in the rearview mirror, kind of back out to pull forward and leave, I remember my heart sank because I thought, oh, my God, what's going to happen now? And I found out very quickly. I mean, the guy that I was with decided to go ahead. We still sat there for a few minutes, and I'm like, man, what do I do? Because it's like I still had that knife at my side. And he started talking, kind of rambling then, and he pulled out, and I said, okay, can you just take me home? I mean, I was still kind of naive at that point. That, and two, I'm thinking, how can I just get home? How can I get to my friend's house? And what I did, basically, as we got to the highway, I told him, where to turn. That's when I realized, though, when we passed where he should have turned, that's when, and by the way, when he pulled out he put the hunting knife on the dashboard. So I kept it on the dashboard near him. And this was, back in the day when we didn't wear seatbelts. So I didn't have a seatbelt on, and this will become relevant a little bit later on in this, but I didn't have a seatbelt on. We were heading, out of town. He drove past where he was supposed to turn. And at that point, he was starting to tell me how he was going to torture me with the knife and how the knife would know me before he knew me. And literally I remember hearing bits and pieces of it. And I mean, I'm just literally praying to the God that I believed in, please help me. I don't know what to do, And as he sped up, he started telling me more and more how he was going to torture me and literally how, what all he was going to do to me with this knife. I mean, he really had the assassination with this knife. And so at that point, I'm still thinking he's going to rape me. And I had literally, being a cocky 17-year-old, I started to reach back into my jeans pocket, and I pulled out my license, and I said, "You can't touch me. I'm jailbait." How naive was that, John? I'm jailbait.
Well, look, I'm not going to criticize your response to that because I wasn't there, number one. Number two, I would do whatever it took at that moment to try to find a way to get out. And if that worked, if that made him think even for a slightest second, I need to rethink this, it was well worth it. Did it work?
Oh, no. That's when he told me he was going to kill me and nobody would find my body.
This is going from bad to worse. We are talking with Constance Drew. Constance is talking about when she was 17 years old, wound up getting a ride with someone who turned out to be, later on she discovered, a serial killer. When we return, we're going to talk about her life and death struggle and how she escaped his grasp. Trust me, you don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page.
Breakfast with Champions is the tool I use in the morning to get myself ready to face the world. There is so much negativity as you move about your day from traffic to politics. The conversations are motivating and inspiring, and I can face the world with a positive attitude. So join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms. Download the Clubhouse app today for free and join us soon. Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Back to a conversation with Constance Drew, calling us from Arizona. Constance, she is a podcaster. Her podcast is called Wickedly Wise Women Entrepreneurs Podcast. She is a very successful business person and business coach. Her website is startup2success.com, and she has an upcoming book called A Drive with a Serial Killer. Will be published very soon. Constance, you found yourself 17 years old in a car with this guy threatening to kill you with a knife, and you pulled out your driver's license saying, I'm underage. And obviously that didn't do anything but maybe aggravate him, or what?
In a sense it excited him. But what did happen literally very quickly, again, he was going about 65 miles an hour. I knew he was heading me out of town into the mountains because I knew that area. So I really knew I was in trouble. And, of course, he had laughed. I'll never forget that, like him laughing and slapping the steering wheel, saying, it's not going to matter. They're not going to find your body anyway. And that's when I literally remember grabbing the handle, the door handle. And that was back in the day, when we didn't have, he couldn't lock me inside the car. And the door wasn't locked. I didn't have a seatbelt on. And I literally can still feel that metal in my hand. And, thinking that, okay, I'm going to pull this handle up and I'm going to jump out of this car. If I'm going to die today, I'm going to die falling out of this car. I'm not going to let this man do to me what he is saying he's going to do to me. And the other thing, too, all of this went through my mind very quickly. But the other thing, too, is I thought, I don't want my parents to never know. At least if I die in a gully here, they'll know what happened to me. If he gets away with me, they'll never know. I probably wouldn't want them to know what happened. And so literally, I'll never forget, because right as I'm pulling the handle halfway up and getting ready to do the last pull to jump out, he goes, damn, I forgot the battery acid. And he started slowing down. And because of the way that he, yelled, it shocked me. So I had let go of the door handle. He slowed down and made a U-turn and went into pulled into an auto parts store that was on the side of the road. And we were the only ones there. And, at that point, and like I said, I did not do a lot of talking through this, because I could tell it's like the less that I talked, the less, engaged he got. Because it almost seemed like if I talked to him very much, he got more excited about what he was going to do to me. But at that point, when we pulled into that auto parts store, this time he grabbed the knife, and he started to get out of the car. He put it in the back of his jeans, basically, I guess his belt loop, pulled his shirt over it, and he looked at me and he told me, he said, don't you say a word, don't you get out of this car, and don't move, because if you do, I'm going to kill whoever's inside the store. So then he took it from not just me, he took it to somebody else. And I'll never forget hearing that bell when he opened the bell to go into the store. And I'm sitting there in shock, saying, and literally just cry. At that point, I did start crying. I'm like, what do I do now? Because I knew that I was athletic, but I knew he was more athletic than me. So I thought, if I get out of this car, what are my chances of me being able to outrun him? So, all these thoughts, you have no idea how quickly in that situation, thoughts just fly through your mind. And the other thought I had was I can't dare go in, because I think he will kill me and everybody else in the store. And there was nobody there. And literally, I remember sitting there trembling, staring at that stupid door, just waiting for him to come out and not knowing what to do. And about that time, a pickup pulled up a few places over from where we were parked. And there were two men in the front of the cab, and there were three young teenagers in the back. I remember thinking to myself, oh, my God, what do I do now? I'm already accepted the ride with this guy who's turning out to be really strange. Am I going to take my chance with these other guys? Well, I didn't know what else to do, so I ran over to them. I got out of the car. I ran over really quickly. And I said, you've got to get me out of here. Please take me home. This guy that, drove me here, he's really kind of strange. Can you please take me home? But I didn't tell them details because I was afraid that he would hurt the people in that pickup. So I waited until, and the funny thing is, because one of the guys, as he's getting out, I said, do you want us to go take care of him? I said, no, just get me out of here, please. And as we were driving, I waited till we almost got to where I was staying. And actually, the driver looked at me and said, I told you initially, it was like you were as safe as in the hands of God. We're getting you home. And that's when I told them about the knife. And I said, I didn't want to take the chance that you might get hurt as well. And John, after that, I went on shutdown mode. It's like I completely blocked that from my memory for decades. And it was about 11 years after that I had gone on to college. I had gotten married. I had my 3 children. And I still needed a couple of years of college to complete because I've been a stay-at-home mom with a licensed daycare out of my home. And I went back to college. For the summer, I needed to take some prerequisite courses before I finished my semester, where I drove 100 miles each way 3 days a week to finish my degree. But a friend and I were sitting in a common area. We didn't have TVs in our rooms. And so I was staying in a dorm during the week, just for the summer sessions, and then I would go home on the weekends. She and I were just kind of hanging out, laughing, this, and that, and the other. And I'll never forget this either, because we were just kind of joking around and kind of had the TV on as background noise. And all of a sudden she stared at the TV and she looked shocked. And man, when I looked up, I completely just left my body. I saw the face of someone that I had not seen in over a decade. And he was on America's Most Wanted.
Oh. And that was the guy that was driving the car that threatened to kill you.
Yep, it was definitely him. It's
what was he wanted for?
Serial rape and serial murder.
When you say serial, what people really don't understand is that's someone who does it repeatedly. They have a pattern. Quite often they have an MO, but it's not always the case. But they deliberately track people, they target people, and quite often with serial rapists, they turn into serial murderers because they can't leave the victim behind. And I'm not saying that to justify what they do. I just want people to understand what it is, how dangerous this guy was. And you don't know at that point how far in his serial killing career he was.
It's like I blanked out at that point. I was just so shocked. And the reason why the girl that I was with, she had known him. He had grown up in her area. So we started talking a little bit about him. And I just told her, I said, he abducted me, and we talked. And I know he had, at that point, I don't remember the numbers, but I know it was several. And it really made me wonder at that point, was I his practice runner, and had he done this to other women before me?
Well, we know one thing for sure. We know what his intentions were.
That's when it really, talking about really becoming real, because I knew that he had said this stuff, but then when you actually see proof that he's done it.
Here's something, when people say, I had to learn this the hard way as a rookie cop. When people say they're going to punch you, you learn to take them seriously. When people say, hey, I'm going to kill you, and they are armed, you have to take it seriously, like they mean what they're going to say. And part of us, it's so unnatural for what we go through and how we live our lives, we don't think they're serious.
That's exactly right. I mean, because it's so beyond comprehension that somebody actually, a stranger, wants to kill you. You're thinking, what did I do to you? Why would you want to kill me? Why am I the chosen one, so to speak?
And I get that, Constance. One of the overriding things that we do have similar. As a cop, I understand people shoot at police. I get it. They're trying to avoid apprehension. I understand that. The 4 times people shot at me, trying to shoot me, every time there was a moment of, I can't believe this is happening to me. And I can't believe they're trying to kill me. They don't even know me. They have no idea who I am. We're talking with Constance Drew. We're talking about when she was 17 years old and she wound up in a car ride with a person who wound up being a serial killer. And yes, he did threaten her. Yes, he was violent. He threatened rape, murder, torture, and more. We have so much more to talk about. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. What is the Newsbreak app, and why should you follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app? Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app.
Breakfast with Champions is my morning go-to. Working from home and being an empty nester, sometimes I really need to feel connected to people. I just open the Clubhouse social audio app and I can listen in or participate in the live conversation in the Breakfast with Champions show. It's a great way to connect with people and be inspired. Breakfast with Champions, where everyone has a seat at the table. Download the Clubhouse app today for free and join me in Breakfast with Champions.
Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Back to our conversation with Constance Drew, calling us from Arizona. Constance is a podcaster. Her podcast is Wickedly Wise Women Entrepreneurs Podcast. She's a business coach, a successful business person herself. Website is startup2success.com. That's startup2success.com. She's authored the book coming out soon, A Drive with a Serial Killer. We're talking about you were 17. You wound up in the car with this guy who's a serial killer. You find out later on, watching America's Most Wanted, it's this guy. And he's killed and murdered and raped numerous women. And how old were you when you realized this?
I would have been about 28.
And it had to be a real sucker punch, for lack of better words, because you had put this out of your mind. You went on, insisted on living your life. You had plans. You're determined. You're doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, boom, there he is on television. It had to be like a cascading series of events for you. Like, where do you go from there?
You know, the body works in a mysterious way, because I immediately went back on shutdown mode in the sense of blocking it out of my memory. I was thinking about that, and I was married to my husband for 9 years before we divorced, and I don't think I ever shared this with him. Like I mentioned earlier, I never shared it with my parents. It's like I just went back in this protective mode. And I did go on later to have, another incident that was a life and death situation that I share in my book. But it did take me, that's actually what prompted me to move to the East Coast and take what I call my spiritual journey. Because at that point, John, I had realized that, man, I have had, these people wanting to kill me. I don't know why I'm laughing about it, but I'm like,
Well, the option is what? Cry? I mean, I get it. These things happen. Yeah. I sometimes chuckle about them, but when I really talk about them and when I feel the feelings, it's not funny.
No, it's not. I mean, it's like...
It's a defense mechanism is what I'm saying. I get when you chuckle.
Yeah, that's the way that I dealt with it. I went through a few more traumas, and literally when I got on a Greyhound bus with a one-way ticket and went to the East Coast and lived for several years. And that, for me, that is how I started to rebuild my life. I initially made that choice because I had a domestic partner who did threaten my children. He had threatened me, but when he threatened my children, I knew that it was serious. And so I did leave my children behind. And that's probably the hardest part that I share.
Yeah.
Because especially being a mother in the 90s, I was so harshly judged about the decision that I made. But I did it for numerous reasons. I think what really happened was the events of being with a serial killer, the events of being in a domestic violence situation, my children being threatened, it just all accumulated, and I just couldn't take it anymore.
One of the things I hear quite often from people that really go through a lot of trauma is they feel like they're a burden on their family, in particular their children. And their children would be a lot better off if I wasn't around having X, Y, and Z impact on them.
That's a lot how I felt, and especially in this situation, it literally turned out to the point where I left my children behind because I knew that their father would keep them in the same home, the same church, the same school, same Christian school that we had enrolled them in. Their life would be more stable. I was the unstable one at that point, and I'll be the first to admit it because I'd gone through all these things. I hadn't learned how to deal with them. And I felt like I was not the best mother for them at that time. So combined with that and literally police going to my sister's house and saying, you need to be careful, her boyfriend is threatening her children, you and your kids, it was very significant. So there again, I had a very significant life and death situation. So I felt like it was safer for my children at the time for me to leave. Now, I chose to leave to protect them, but I chose to stay to regain my sanity. So I didn't move back west until the last decade, and I went on what I would call a spiritual journey. I really got to know myself. John, sometimes you hear people say, they go somewhere, they want to get right with God. With me, it was get right with me.
Yeah.
And I call it getting
right-sized, and I've been taught that phrase, that I'm not that big, bad, powerful person. I did the best I could. Did I make bad decisions? Did I do things incorrectly? Yes. Have I learned more and done better as I've gotten older? Yes. But I had to get right-sized.
That's a really good way to put it. And one thing that has been a comfort to me, though, over the years, and I did go through a lot of counseling, of course, to deal with complex trauma. And that helped me. I will say that, there were times that I still held back. But I have, I've sought support when I needed it. I've learned to kind of recognize different triggers for myself, different ways that I can get through things. And support is always a big key. And I've learned how to let myself feel more feelings. It's just, sometimes you just have to feel it. And I had to do a lot of feeling writing this book, just putting myself back in there in those situations. But I think I've come out of it a much better person, and the comfort with my children was all three of my children are very successful.
Good. I was going to ask, how's your relationship with your children now?
I have a good relationship with my daughters. My son and I have a little bit of a strained one. And that's, unfortunate, but I think someday he will come around. I think they each dealt with the situations differently, and especially as I got older and they've become parents. I have 7 beautiful grandchildren, and each of my children, my son is in upper management with a big bank. My oldest daughter is a registered nurse, and she has her degree in nursing and works as a lead nurse, I believe, in Texas. And my youngest daughter has a dance studio in New Mexico. She's been married for several years to her husband, who's a successful real estate broker.
Yeah.
And they have their 4 kids. But each of my children on separate occasions have told me over the years that they were glad I did what I did.
One of the hardest things I had to learn how to do, Constance, was let people be angry. Let them deal and heal on their terms. Because it took me what it took for me to get to where I'm at today. And where you're at today is very successful. You've got this book coming out, A Drive with a Serial Killer. It'll be published on Amazon. And part of it talks about this, but it really talks about your entire life's journey, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And tell us about your podcast and your business.
Well, my podcast is Wickedly Wise Women Entrepreneurs, and I'd like to interview women who have not necessarily gone through similar traumas, but women who have overcome something and become successful, so that we can talk about how to encourage other women to do that as well. And the book is A Drive with a Serial Killer. It will be, published, I believe, in November. It's at the publishers now. And I work with podcasters and business owners starting podcasts to help with their marketing. That's really what I focus on. It's like the podcast is part of a marketing strategy. I could talk marketing day in and day out.
So, in your website is startup2success.com. Does that detail everything you're doing?
It will. It details most of it, yes.
There's a lot on there, by the way. I did check it out. I did a little scoping out before the interview. And by the way, I'll repeat, I met Constance in the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, which, by the way, is free. There's a version for Android and iPhone devices as well. Look for me, follow me, John, Minnesota J, Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, or at L-E-T Radio Show. And would you give people your information on Clubhouse so they can look for you?
Yes, they can find me at Podcast Biz Coach is my handle. And I'm also a Club Pod leader, and I have weekly rooms.
And by the way, I'm a Club Pod leader now, too. I kind of feel like I've arrived. Constance, I got to say this. I really appreciate you coming on. I know it took a lot of effort and a long time for you to consider doing this and telling your story. The reason why I'm so grateful you told your story about the drive to serial killer is, A, that you survived. You built a good life for yourself afterwards. And a lot of people need to realize that no matter what they're going through, they can have a good life as well. But I think it's important for all those who did not survive these serial killers that someone tells their story. And I will be forever grateful that you took the time to tell us.
Oh, I appreciate it, John. I think it was mine to share.
A huge thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast version of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, by the way, which is a nationally syndicated radio show. If you like our show, there's 2 simple things you can do. Go to our website, letradio.com. Add to your favorites. Check it often. You can find episodes of the show right there. And the second one involves our Facebook page. It's so easy to find great content, including past episodes of the show. And when you see something that you like, that resonates with you, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.